Hey, what's going on, folks? Welcome to episode 3 of Sequence Break. In case you're new here, let me tell you a little bit of what we're doing. So in video games, you might need a key item to get to a certain area of the game. You might have to bring a certain character with you to a certain part of the game to trigger a cutscene or a story element. But what happens when we skip over these important part of the games? Does something crazy happen? And that's what Sequence Break is all about. So go ahead and relax while we take a look at one of the most iconic games of all time, Ocarina of Time. So simple and clean is the way that I feel we should start this episode. Now, sequence breaking in Zelda doesn't necessarily mean it has to be story-driven elements. Like this example here, there are triggers all over the Ocarina of Time that tell the game to load and unload areas. And this goes even further than just culling. Areas like here where you first get the sword, if you fail the trip to trigger and go back to where you came from in the village, you'll see that there's very little left, only enough for the player to have seen through the tunnel itself. And you can discover for yourself that if you walk far enough off the geometry, you're gonna fall into the void. Okay, now it's time to get a little bit serious. The first big event in this game is that you get an ocarina from Saria before leaving the Kokiri village. So let's ask ourselves something. If we manage to break the sequence of getting this ocarina, what would happen when you have to learn a song later in the game? Well, thankfully we don't have to leave Kokiri village through the normal exit, which triggers this cutscene. We could go through the Kokiri forest and then jump onto that bridge that leads to the exit without having to talk to Saria whatsoever. In doing so, we're going to go all the way to Zelda's garden, talk to Zelda, and get to the part where we learn Zelda's lullaby from Impa. And what ends up happening is if you don't have Saria's ocarina, the game implants the Ocarina of Time into any sequence where you have none. Now that doesn't add the ocarina to your inventory, it just defaults to the Ocarina of Time in scenes like this. Let's now talk about two things from Zora's domain. The first thing I want to talk about is the Zoras Sapphire. Now, a lot of you might recall that there's a mini-boss at a certain point that requires you to have Princess Ruto with you so that she can climb on top of the platform and then be bamboozled and force you into a fight. Well, what if we didn't have Princess Ruto with us? What if we could get on top of that platform? What's gonna happen then? Well, sorry to say, no matter what, you can't interact with the Sapphire, despite the fact that you can lock onto it. You could try pressing A near it, you could try throwing a boomerang at it, but nothing's really gonna work here. And skipping this event entirely has no effect on the future scenes, so you will get it after you beat the main boss. But hold on a second, let's backpedal just a little bit. What if we never gave the letter to King Zora? Obviously, if you don't give him the letter, he doesn't move out of the way, but if we bypass that and bring Princess Ruto back to him, the results get a little bit grim. Unfortunately, Princess Ruto does come back, but she's stuck inside of her dad. And I thought, no big deal, I could just go get the letter and present it to him now. Maybe that'll get him to move out of the way. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Once you complete all these events and you try to present the letter, the game doesn't acknowledge the fact that you have to present that to King Zora. And so you're stuck with a letter in a bottle, King Zora is stuck blocking the way to Jabu Jabu, and Princess Ruto is stuck inside of her dad.
Nope.
Fun little fact, if you got the bombs from the second dungeon and didn't finish it and decided to go and do the Zora dungeon instead, you could technically do the first 3 spiritual stones out of sequence by getting the Zoras Sapphire first and then the Goron Ruby. And without those 2 stones, you can't trigger the cutscene with Zelda throwing the ocarina in the river. So what if we had the Song of Time in our inventory but none of the spiritual stones? Well, now that is a different story. If we happen to have the song and we play it at any given time, the cutscene will play out with all the spiritual stones resting on the altar and opening the door to the Master Sword. Meaning the only essential role that the spiritual stones actually have is triggering that cutscene where Zelda gives you the Ocarina of Time. You technically don't even need the Ocarina of Time to open up that door. As you saw in the footage, it was used with Saria's ocarina. Now, full disclosure, this entire series is done with tools. I know that sequence breaking is often associated with speedrunners, and it should be noted that what you're looking at here can be accomplished with glitches. I'll leave a link in the video description down below how you could technically do it yourself. But anyways, the question that we're asking here is what happens when we get to the final area of the game with young Link instead of adult Link? And what's great is that even if you're young Link in scenes that are supposed to have adult Link, the character model acts out all the scenes anyway. Usually off camera though, because young Link is so small. But what's really strange is that in this one scene, young Link actually rises from the ground and gets into position so his head can be properly in the shot, which can't be said for any of the other scenes that I've checked out. After that, obviously, you're supposed to have that scene where Link gets his Master Sword knocked out of his hand, but instead, young Link gets his Kokiri sword knocked out of his hand. Oh, okay, actually scratch that, he gets his entire hand knocked off. That's not looking good. Anyways, what's great is that you don't even need the Master Sword to defeat Ganon. The programmers decided that you can't use the big Goron sword to finish him off, but if you were young Link, it behaves the same as the Master Sword. Ergo, you can not only defeat Ganon, but also hit puberty just a little bit too early here. I do want to point out too that I tried to break the sequence of getting the Master Sword before the event where the fire goes down, but that barrier of fire actually goes well beyond how it looks on the screen. There's an invisible barrier that sets you on fire no matter how high up you go, and this is what it looks like if we speed up the footage and constantly hover, trying desperately to get over that invisible barrier. Link is just about as effective as a ping pong ball between two pro players. So naturally, when I found out that when Child Link is in the Adult Link scenes, he acts out the scenes that Adult Link would do, I had to go back and find out if the same thing would happen if Adult Link was in the Child Link scenes. And I'm very happy to report that it did not disappoint. Many of which don't even require camera manipulation to even see what's going on with his face. I think by far my favorite scene out of the handful of things that I checked out was him walking backwards away from Saria. It's very clear that Adult Link was not meant to do this. Hey, thank you very much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I know that it's a little bit on the shorter side. Unfortunately, that's the side effect of sequence break. There's a lot less things to actually discover in games like this. If this is your first time watching a sequence break episode, I actually have 2 more episodes. I have Resident Evil 4 and one that you're probably a lot more interested in, which is Breath of the Wild. I'll leave links to both of those down below, as well as on the screen here. Oh, and people that are still listening at this point, just letting you know right now, I might do a boundary break episode on 2 things. One is YouTube itself, which I've been invited to YouTube's headquarters to do boundary breaking within their walls. The only problem is I don't have the money to get there, but we'll see what happens. And the other thing is I might start boundary breaking animation. I'm trying to work with Flash animators to see if I can boundary break their old work, and if I can pull that off, man, it'll be a ton of fun, and I'll let you know if that happens. Either way, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next week with a boundary break episode. Take care.